Alrighty. How are we all? Hey, Richard. Alright. So, friend of the channel, Not So Erudite, debated Rachel Wilson on feminism. And I think she was smart enough not to immediately go after, family tragedies as a go-to gotcha, because dear God, what an embarrassing decision by that last bozo.
Do you understand how you...
Patience. And then before that, someone seems to have preempted my Odyssey review. Not in its entirety, of course. I go a lot deeper, but... that's not the Odyssey review. This person from Slate, Theo Nash, who's apparently a classicist, has a similar befuddled read of Emily Wilson's critiques of Nolan's Odyssey film. I'm a classicist. Were Emily Wilson and I watching the same Odyssey movie? The celebrated translator used baffling arguments to flay Christopher Nolan's adaptation of Homer's poem. And this, by the way, is how academics insult each other. Very, very cruelly. So, Wilson's fame is closely tied to Homer's Odyssey, a poem that the Oxford and Yale-educated classicist translated in 2017. Her version, celebrated as the first translation by a woman into English verse, has sold over 1 million copies and is widely assigned in classrooms. That's an odd decision. I like the translation. It's not the one I would assign in classrooms. Like any other translation, it is an interpretation, especially in a poem. How something is said is just as important as what is said. Wilson's decision... oh, we're going to be watching two Wilsons tonight. That's kind of odd. Wilson's decision to translate into verse and to keep the same number of lines as the original preserves the rapidity and poetry of the original. Debatable. But it also forces her to be very concise, and her unadorned language occasionally feels a bit blunt. The poetic meter that she chooses maintains the reading of the Odyssey as poetry. The same line number does not keep the same rapidity because you have to now squeeze more movements into fewer lines. Because the lines have more content sometimes. So it's actually, strictly speaking, not translating either of those two things at all. Instead, it's the story being read in the correct genre, with some corrections for anachronistic, misogynistic intrusions by other translators. Some of her choices have attracted the derision of a subset of online right-wing reactionaries, but in truth, they are mostly just angry that a woman has dared to interpret Homer. Their unhinged politics and violent rhetoric have made it generally difficult to engage in any sort of meaningful criticism of Wilson's Odyssey or more recent Iliad. I'm going to be real with you. I don't think the issue is that a woman interpreted Homer. I think the issue in general, to be clear, they are misogynistic, but I have not seen the nature of the critiques, bad as they are, has not orbited that. Generally, it's actually been racially motivated. So Nolan's diverse casting has been blamed on the fact that he used a woke translation. How these two relate to each other, given that Wilson does not racially diversify the cast of the actual poem at all, is anyone's guess. But it's very much like Venn diagram type associations. It's not because it's a woman. Although, and I'm going to be honest with you, as a left-winger, it rubbed me the wrong way that this was being advertised as the translation by a woman. Not because I have a problem with the translation by a woman, but because a woman can be reactionary, and I don't like the idea that this is therefore a feminist translation because it's a woman. This is a feminist translation because it's by a feminist and does specific things to unpack and sort of peel away misogynistic, patriarchal, etc., additions to the text by other translational efforts. On X, I, referring to the reviewer, have probably spent too much time defending Wilson's work against ideological attacks from those who feel that Homer should support their regressive worldviews. These people do not, as a rule, know the first word of Greek, but opine with a confidence as savage as it is unearned. Contrary to what naysayers may believe, Wilson's Odyssey has replaced neither the original nor any of the earlier translations that many continue to prefer. As a classicist, I appreciate it for making Homer accessible to a new audience. I don't care. I don't think we benefit from Homer being accessible to a new audience. I think we benefit from people making positive use of material. This could have been an entirely original story, and it would have had, frankly, the same significance. The fact that it's the Odyssey has had exactly one function, and that is to make it the centerpiece of a culture war fiasco, of a culture war spectacle. That is all. It is perfectly fitting that Wilson, whose Odyssey translation, specifically the "Tell me about a complicated man" opening line, has been cited by Nolan. I would need to refresh my memory. What did he actually say here? I think it's Emily Wilson. So here we go. He says, I think it's the Emily Wilson translation that begins, "Tell me about a complicated man," Nolan tells Empire. The genius of the character, the cleverness, the inventiveness of him, that was a huge part of what interested me. He's not just a soldier, he's an amazing strategist, a very wily person. Like, this is like a level of distance from the Emily Wilson translation that nobody talks about. He didn't even know for certain it was the Emily Wilson translation that started that way. So, Wilson was asked her thoughts on the new film, and indeed given vast real estate to express them. The resulting piece, a 4,000-word barn burner that briefly crashed the London Review of Books website, is unequivocally negative regardless of the backhanded praise with which Wilson opens. Although humbled that Nolan has read her translation, she is blunt in her assessment of his creation. I would be ashamed to have written any part of this script. Wilson's rhetorical climax has been widely circulated. It lacks psychological, emotional, political, and ethical depth. Stupid. Genuinely stupid. It actually has more... It has more ethical depth, certainly, than the original poem. Its narrative structure is gimmicky. I don't know what that means. Its narrative structure actually was probably the most accurate thing to the Odyssey. Genuinely. Because the Odyssey is not linear in time. The writing is abysmal. Disagree. None of the characters has convincing motivation for their actions or words. There are no sex scenes, and all the food looks horrible. I can't get over this one. In a world where we have recent publications, like in the last couple decades, like Circe, for example, which specifically reappropriate characters from the Odyssey to be translated through a feminist lens, she's complaining that the women were not toys for Odysseus. I find that so bizarre. That Wilson did not like the film is perfectly fair, but in the second paragraph of her review, a reference to exploding vehicles makes one start to wonder if she watched the same movie as the rest of us. She says there's exploding vehicles. It's like the Giants break a ship. That's not an exploding vehicle. There is the Trojan horse, of course, and some dramatic shipwrecks, but even if we call these vessels vehicles, they are not exactly exploding. The impression that something has gone a bit awry continues throughout the review, culminating in several truly head-scratching moments for the reader. Wilson is naturally at her best when discussing the poem itself. This is a work to which she has dedicated years of her life, and she knows it intimately. But too often she simply criticizes Nolan for deviating from it, as if the filmmaker's choices were not also an act of interpretation. The close attention to the text that informs Wilson's translation is lacking in her reading of the movie, and the idea that Nolan might have something new to say about the Odyssey is denied. At times her critical eye is so insensitive that she appears to willfully be misunderstanding basic elements of the film's plot, characters, and themes. And I have a theory as to why this is. I think it's, at least to my eyes, it is very likely that Wilson saw a whole bunch of people complaining about the inaccuracies of the Nolan film, blaming her for its woke elements, And she, from her very privileged position in academia and in publishing, decided that she wanted to tread a middle ground and make sure that the vast and lucrative right-wing audiences for these productions know that it was not her fault. I think that's what it was. This is the case especially when discussing the role of the gods. In Homer, they take the form of men or women and are subject to the same pettiness and jealousies as mortals. As Wilson notes, this is hard to portray seriously on the screen, but Nolan's decision to depict the gods primarily as elemental forces, warning rumbles of thunder or violent storms at sea, is not evidence that he has decided to leave them out, as Wilson puts it. Her interpretation is both over-literal and superficial. There are no gods, and yet shipwrecks and death are presented as the inevitable consequence of blinding the son of Poseidon and devouring the cattle of the sun. This is all quite impossible to explain in the absence of gods. They are invisible, with the exception of Zendaya's Athena, but no less real for that. The theology is not quite Homeric. Some have complained that it is too Christian. I don't know where the hell people are getting this from. In the review by Wilson, she says that Sinon's name pronunciation, which should be Sinon in the Latin, is somehow a reference to sin, and that he is in some way like some weird kind of Christian depiction of innocence, which is bizarre. There's literally nothing Christian about the poem. It betrays like a weird ignorance of actually how Greek ideas around guilt work. Because there is shame and guilt in ancient Greek poetry. What there isn't is the idea of sin or of the need to cleanse oneself. So this person, for some reason, also buys into the idea that it is too Christian, but leaving that aside, it is very familiar to anyone who has read Sophocles' tragedies in which the gods act indirectly to ruin those who break their laws. Wilson's reading of human characters is similarly opaque. Anne Hathaway's Penelope, she complains, has nothing to do except yearn for Matt Damon for reasons unknown. The reasons, of course, are pretty clear. He is her husband and the father of her son. Because a 3-hour movie has less time to explore his characters than it does a 12,000-line poem. She's kind of more explored in the film than in the poem, to be honest with you. Wilson discards this Penelope as barely more interesting than the totem Odysseus carries to remember her by. And yet Hathaway's is one of the strongest and most celebrated performances in the film. Her Penelope is a prisoner in her own home, able to express her frustrated rage only privately to her son, Tom Holland's Telemachus, in a scene that will surely be her Oscar reel. I do not understand this misread of Anne Hathaway's Penelope. Anne Hathaway's character literally goes out and says, hey, I've been managing this place for 20 years. Why the fuck? Why the fuck am I being forced to marry a younger guy to do a job that I've already been doing? She comments on the absurdity of it. It's very clear that the reason why she yearns for Odysseus is not because she needs a man there, it's because Odysseus is her equal. That's the entire point. Agamemnon, too, is reduced to the one in the weird Darth Vader outfit. This is a strange return to criticisms from before the release of the film, when Agamemnon's oversized and anachronistic helmet was lazily taken as proof that Nolan was being careless with his source material, although he made no strict promises to ideas of historical accuracy. I think that was actually deliberately part of the film taking the position of, this is sort of a psychological, that this is from the viewpoint of the memory of people who were there. So Agamemnon is feared. Agamemnon is this, like, peak of violence that you do not defy. So he is remembered, and he looks like this giant phantasmal, like, invincible thing. Unfortunately, it looks a lot like Batman. The Trojans have weird, almost clay-like masks that anonymize them. They are essentially depersonalized, and the kind of thing one would maybe remember from childhood if you were, like, at some event or something and it was dark and you didn't have, like, a clear idea of, like, costumes maybe that were being worn or whatnot, and you just had sort of an impression of what it was like, right? Or it was just bad costume design. Either were. And yet, in a film that does not lack for memorable images, it is the silhouette of Agamemnon walking through the gates of Troy that may be the most striking. That the man inside, played by Benny Safdie, does not live up to the armor and dies naked and vulnerable is precisely the point. A film is not a poem. Costume design contributes to imagery, symbolism, and meaning, and may draw inspiration from sources other than archaeology. Good point. What Wilson most understands, though, is the crux of Nolan's film, that the Trojan horse was a breach of Xenia, Zeus's law of hospitality, and as a result, all of civilization would collapse in punishment. For Wilson, Elliot Page's Sinon, a young Ithacan who is killed presenting the vessel to the Trojans, is part of a muddled subplot. Why, she asks, does the sinless Sinon want in on the scheme? I don't know why the hell she keeps calling him sinless. It's so weird. It's like the one trans dude. Oh, he must be an innocent angel child, like our nation's gay population. Why, she asks, does the sinless Sinon want in on the scheme if the sack of Troy was as bad as the movie wants to suggest? But the entire point of the sack is that its horrors are realized only after they are already set in motion, not incidentally, unlike the bomb in Nolan's Oppenheimer. And significantly, as is made clear in the movie, Sinon did not know that he was part of the trick. It was his job to tell the Trojans that the horse was a gift, and to do that, as Damon's Odysseus attempts to justify, Sinon had to be deceived too. It's also important that they never treat the war as bad. They never treat killing Trojans as bad. It is 100% the use of the horse, a symbol of peace and diplomacy and religious importance, that is the problem. That's the breach of Xenia. And not because, it's a guest that they are not treating with hospitality. Remember, the entire premise of Zeus's law in the film is that you treat the stranger with hospitality because you do not know if he may be a god in disguise. What the horse does is it makes it so that if you treat the stranger with hospitality or with trust, by definition, you are inviting destruction. And so, Zeus's law, effectively, is broken because it is impracticable. Which means that from now on, the posture of all peoples towards each other is a posture of endless war. Which, by the way, is what happens when you, for example, engage in diplomacy with a country like the United States did with Iran, and then you use that opportunity to catch them off guard and assassinate their heads of state. It's actually a really poignant message for right now. A gift, that is the key idea. Wilson objects that in Nolan's Odyssey, slaughtering people with the help of trickery, technology, and weapons is presented as bad when the Greeks are killing the Trojans who have violated Xenia, but good when Odysseus is killing the suitors who have violated Xenia. Now, there is a Greek tradition that Paris' abduction of Helen, an act that started the Trojan War, was considered a breach of Xenia, and the war was therefore justified by Zeus. This is stated most explicitly in Aeschylus, but it is a matter of interpretation. Ancient Greek texts were free to emphasize, ignore, or downplay whatever elements of the tradition they wished. Modern films, of course, have the same privilege. Nolan does not linger on the that's a bit of an overstatement, by the way, but leaving that aside. Nolan does not linger on the circumstances of Helen's departure, is ambivalent as to her willingness, and does not connect the episode with Zeus's law. Just because an idea is familiar from Greek literature does not mean that it can or should be read into another text. And indeed, Wilson's reading fundamentally misses the point that in Nolan's film it is the Greeks who offend Zeus by hiding inside the horse, violating all that's ever sacred between people. Wilson notes that for all the importance given to hospitality, this, by the way, is an important line, all that's ever sacred between people. That between people part is the critical part, not the sacred part. The important thing is that the sacred is what binds people together. It is the between the people, right? So by violating, by changing what is actually the means by which bonds are made between people, the means by which connections are maintained despite the case of war. By the way, one possible etymology of religion emphasizes that part, the religion part, has a similar root to ligate, potentially, meaning to bond, to tie, to wrap, etc. That's what's being referred to here, that sort of notion, where it's like the conditions of connection outside of merely political/military, outside of simply a relationship of dominance. Gone. But Nolan does not play so loosely. Wilson notes that for all the importance given to hospitality, there is no Zeus, but Nolan does not play so loosely with cause and effect. Odysseus' journey, the emergent threat of the people from the sea, everything follows from what happened at Troy. Even the arrival of the suitors in Penelope's hall and their outrage, I'm glad he picked this up. He picked this up, that's good. Even the arrival of the suitors in Penelope's hall and their outrage against their hosts are not accidents, but direct results of the breakdown of the divine order precipitated by the sack of Troy. Nope. Nope. It's specifically the result of Odysseus leaving his home out of fear of Agamemnon in the hope of protecting his family from Agamemnon. Agamemnon, of course, dies on the return, and in fact, it is going to Troy that endangers his family and his household. Anyways, but direct results from the breakdown of the divine order precipitated by the sack of Troy, enabled by Odysseus. On second viewing, it is clear that this is operative throughout his wanderings. In the village of the Cicones, I'm going to butcher that pronunciation, I apologize. In Polyphemus' cave and in Circe's hut, the relationship between guest and host has broken down completely. These are ideas from the poem, and it is surprising that Wilson so blithely claims that strangers in foreign lands are usually monstrous, to be blinded, robbed, and slaughtered. When Odysseus finally makes it home, the killing of the suitors is something less than a heroic rescue. The mess he cleans up is his own. This is the story that Nolan chose to tell. It is possible to dislike it, and every viewer will have their own criticisms, however precisely or clumsily articulated. Wilson, for her part, posted Wednesday on Blue Sky that she regrets reducing the movie's non-white actors to versions of the black best friend. That was astonishing, by the way. None of them are a best friend to anybody. The first character you see speaking is Travis Scott, who is a rapper playing a bard, effectively playing himself in that time period. The other one is Clytemnestra, and Helen. Helen, who talks back and disses Agamemnon, and Clytemnestra, who kills him. Athena basically humbles Odysseus multiple times. She is never a best friend. She is a god. Other characters are their own agents. One of the suitors is a black dude, for example. It's so weird. The critique would be not that the non-white actors are the black best friend, which is a weirdly racist reduction by itself. The critique would be is that Nolan went out of his way to diversify the cast, but made sure Odysseus, Penelope, obviously Telemachus, Agamemnon, and Menelaus, and the swineherd, and etc. All those people were white. All the main ones were white. That would be the critique. Penelope could have been played by a black woman. Odysseus could have been played by a black man, etc. But the film, like Wilson's translation before it, has drawn more than its share of screeching ideological criticism from those whose hearts and minds were already closed to the possibilities of this interpretation of the story. If as classicists we wish to enter the discussion, it should be not from the distant shelter of Homer's poem, but of the film's own terms. It's weird, too, because a lot of these themes are actually present in the poem. One of the weirdest parts about Wilson's review is that she treats it as if it is simply obvious that, of course, Odysseus would not feel any guilt for the killing of the Trojans or anything like that, or not any regret. But there's literally a scene in which the Trojan horse, I don't know what I was saying there, in which the Trojan horse, the song of the horse is being played while he's at the, this is the Nausicaa sequence. There's a bard. Odysseus asks him, tell us the song of the horse. And his first mate witnesses him weeping. Like a woman who has thrown herself bodily over her husband who has died in defense of Troy. And the imagery very strongly suggests that this is not just a part of the narrative, this is a recollection, right? It's not concrete, it's not definite, but one of the cool things about the Odyssey is that at a narrative level, like at a literary level, it's a lot more complex and interesting than the Iliad is, which is not setting the bar very high. And then Exdarguana says, I generally dislike the film except for Agamemnon, who was the best part by far, which is a really weird thing to say. Weird. I don't know how you enjoyed that. I thought Agamemnon was one of the weaker parts. Anyways. At least somebody's got a brain here. Dear God. Okay. We're going to watch this debate now. Until we get bored. And we're not going to watch these previews because screw that. Okay, here we go.
Please do silence your phones so there are no distractions. Also, for our debate. Is feminism doing more good or more harm? I'm going to start by introducing Rachel, as she will go first. Rachel Wilson is an author and cultural commentator whose fearless research challenges conventional narratives about feminism, women, and family. Please join me in welcoming Rachel Wilson.
Oh, shut the fuck up.
And on your left, we are pleased to welcome Kyla, also known as Not So Erudite. She is a thoughtful commentator who brings psychology, social science, and careful analysis to debates about gender and culture. Please join me in welcoming Not So Erudite. All right, I am setting the timer for 5 minutes. One last thank you to our sponsor, Yonaguni International Cuisine. Check them out in the description box below. And with that, I have the timer set for you, Rachel. The floor is
Why would you sponsor this? That is so weird.
all yours for 5 minutes.
James, Kyla said she's okay with 7 minutes. I probably won't need the full 7, but just thought I would let you know that. I'm probably just going to go a pinch over 5.
You got it.
Okay. All right, so is feminism doing more harm than good? I'm going to say, of course, that I think it's doing more harm. Let's take a brief review of what we've gotten so far from feminism and its 6 pillars of propaganda. So feminism inverted the Western social order in roughly 1 century through its 6 primary pillars, and a 7th that I'm going to introduce to you today. We've got sexual liberation, abortion.
You know what's weird is actually a lot of the more sophisticated feminists actually point out specifically that the propaganda around abortion and sexual liberation being taken as a surrogate for feminism is actually sort of intrinsically reactionary by itself. Just throwing that out there.
Vilification of men, no-fault divorce, demonization of tradition, and either rejection or reinvention.
That's one of the things that's really frustrating about this, because basically everybody that's party to this debate is either a fraud and or is working with a completely reductionistic, not even reductionistic, just a false conception of like who the parties to the debate are. There is no feminist in this debate. That's the weirdest part about this. Kyla Turner is not a feminist. Kyla Turner is a groupie for a man who is currently in court for abusing women in his inner circle. It's so weird that she wants to take this position. I think her sole credential to being a feminist in this debate is that she's a woman like her opponent. It's very strange.
Of Christianity. Tonight, I'm going to focus on the measurable results of these pillars.
You know what? I'm already bored. Screw this. I can't do it. 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 We're going to watch something else, okay? We're going to watch this guy.
Female friend.
This guy, okay? I really don't like this guy. I find this guy creepy, and I find him disingenuous and gross. So we're going to have fun. Here we go. This is, look, they found each other. Isn't that adorable? They found each other. So this is Magpie. Is that what he's calling himself? Magpie? This is Magpie, the host of the channel Reading is a Skill, who inherited a library from his dead father, who is currently exploiting that by using ChatGPT to generate summaries of those books and pretending to a bunch of gormless morons that he has read everything known to man, and then demonstrating that the only books he actually understands are a few Jordan Peterson adjacent thingies. It is very weird, but he is also, as we're about to learn, very funny in the worst way. Here we go.
So I definitely want to get your thoughts on the autism versus schizophrenia framework, the whole value.
This is an autistic person explains why the vibes are so important. The original title was An Autistic Person Explains... it was autism versus schizophrenia. I hate that everyone's changing titles now all the time. It's so annoying. Watch him very closely, by the way. Here, I'm gonna narrow this down so we can get him a little bit bigger here. Watch this guy on the right very closely.
value of intuition, right? Which has kind of been my crusade in the online space, that people act too autistically, quote unquote. And then you had thoughts on what people misunderstand about right-wing thought, which I want to hear about. But before we begin, just so people know,
Brings out the pink hairbrush. What is that?
thought, which I want to hear about. But before we begin, just so people know, how did you come into contact with my channel, and what did you find interesting and resonant?
So you were like, once I got enough views that I could see like the channel analytics, you were one of like the first channels to be overlapped on the first page, and you stayed there for like basically nonstop for like 3/4 of that history, and then you sort of dropped off, came back on, and dropped off again. And now I lost the analytics again for a bit. But anyway, so I started looking at some of the channels that I overlapped, I recognized, and I got very excited. Like, I was really excited when I overlapped Feral Historian.
This is why I don't like this guy. This is why this guy leaves a really strong bad taste in my mouth. There's basically nothing here but the appetitive element of this guy. There's nothing there, just clear as day. There is no depth. There is nothing. There is this creepy weirdo obsessing about analytics and just pretending to read stuff. It is so weird. It is so weird. The people who watch people like this are so weird. Like, so creepy. Like, imagine my audience. Okay, my audience. But if I was literally just giving, like, AI-generated Sparks notes, and you could tell, but they still showed up. That is so weird. P.F. Young was the guy who I think believes in Trump because he went to a Trump rally and enjoyed the vibes. P.F. Young is someone I debated on Jordan Peterson because he was a big Peterson fan and he didn't know any of the contents of the book. We were debating Maps of Meaning, and he literally didn't know about any of its contents. Like, it's weird. It's like, it's low-level fraud. It's weird, low-level fraud. I don't know why on earth they do it. Like, it's not like criminal fraud. It's not like the kind of thing you go to jail for, or you get sued for. But it's just literally just, oh, we're just gonna lie. And it's like, you could do anything else. You could do anything else. But they really want, for you academics in the audience who actually spend time knowing stuff, they really want really dumb people to think that they're like you. And it's just like, why? Why? What's the prize here? None of these people, nobody serious takes you seriously. It's so weird.
And I don't know if you're familiar with him,
Mm-mm.
but others I like were completely unfamiliar, and you were unfamiliar, but you were like consistently like on that first page of overlap, and you had the
Nice.
Dowit symbol, which, so I looked it up, and
It's a skill to be an interesting concern to the library at his disposal. Well, not if you don't read. I think his father was probably a very interesting person who wrote a lot of interesting stuff. I think this guy put down his Switch and was like, oh shit, maybe I can make money off of this hoard of books I inherited.
I saw you had the videos on like the value of vibes and intuition, which is something that I have been arguing about. And I watched several of your videos. I found the one about being a male gender studies major really interesting. And yeah, so that's how I found your channel.
Right on. Okay. All right. Well, as an autistic person, you presumably have seen me call people autistic or say this is an autistic way of thinking and all that.
That's because you're stupid and you can't think of any insults.
I want to get your thoughts on generally the whole point about people. Ian McGilchrist will say our culture is very autistic in that when we think about knowing and we think about knowledge, everyone conceptualizes it as like propositional knowledge and logic. Like, a statement is true if it's logically consistent, which my whole thing is, no, you can have logical consistency as a marker for truth potentially, but don't confuse the marker.
Just to be clear, the reason why these people call it autism is because autistic people have been memed in this space as being associated with having any kind of particular mechanical or technical interests. That is how stupid these people are. These people are so stupid that they pathologize people caring about literally anything. Because look at this guy. He's like a freaking Michael Bay side character. You can hear the neurons just rubbing together like squeaky cheese in his head. There's nothing going on here.
For the map for the territory, because you can very well get into scenarios where you have something that's logically consistent.
Wait, what about the map of the territory? I gotta hear this.
Consistency as a marker for truth potentially, but don't confuse the marker for the map for the territory.
Jesus Christ.
Because you can very well get into scenarios where you have something that's logically consistent, but is detached from reality and not embodied. And that's kind of the role of intuition is like...
Just so we're clear, this guy thinks certified transmit P.F. Young is interesting on the topic of gender. What you need to understand is that this guy is really stupid. I have, as you will see, I've seen bits of this. My read on this guy, having seen bits of this, is that effectively what he is doing is imagine if I vibe coded my entire life. And what I mean by this is imagine if instead of, having a very unhealthy sleep schedule and reading stuff before I talk about it, whether I get it right or wrong, I just picked up a book off the shelf, and when ChatGPT summarized this book, got it. Next. And then I saved those and I memorized them. I think that's what's going on. You'll see as it comes up. These are weirdos. These are weirdos. Like there's something unwholesome going on here. It is weird.
I can't put something into words, but I know it when I see it, and I know it not to be true, even though I can't logically justify it. So as someone who's autistic, first off, actually my first question is, do you think I overuse the term autistic? Do you think I'm too liberal with that term? Should I narrow it down a bit?
Not in the context that you're using it, and obviously there's going to be people with different opinions, but I have a complaint that I want to write a blog post on at some point about, I think there's a lot of disabled people who are capable of working, but hard to get hired and need accommodation employers don't want to give, and so they end up sort of getting way too focused on like petty grievances and like disability activism. Yeah.
Sir.
I think most autistic people are too busy trying to figure out making our lives work to be offended. And I think like what you see with autistic people is you tend to see, and it can often be like both in the same person, different times, different contexts. There's either really strong black and white thinking or really strong perspectivism. And I think it's because combination of we struggle to understand, why are other people doing this? So we try to adhere to hard and fast rules. And then we realize this isn't working. And we're like, how do I understand this?
Hey, I'm going to tell you a little secret, okay? Autistic people understand social interactions. Autistic people can frequently understand social interactions, understand sarcasm, understand subtext, etc., etc. It is a spectrum that is defined by certain social behaviors. The cause of it isn't even known because there is no it. There's no it. There isn't actually a thing that causes autism. There isn't actually a thing that autism refers to. It's a spectrum of symptoms. Sort of like schizophrenia. It doesn't refer to an actual causal thing, but people talk about it like it causes things. Oh, he's like that because he's autistic. No, he's labeled autistic because he's like that. That's actually how it functions. Even doctors will get this wrong. It is astonishing how sloppy people are with this. But for the record, no, you cannot universalize the behaviors of autistic people in that way. Hey, Echo and chat, welcome.
And then we realize, different things for different people, different contexts. And so you'll see, like, I have a few things where I'm probably prone to black and white thinking. I know a lot of autistic people who more or less prone, like in different areas.
And there is a tendency for people in general, when they find a label and they have nothing else going for them, to try and justify their existence by using the label to stereotype themselves. And by extension, stereotype a bunch of other people along with them. This is really gross. Don't do that.
Okay, interesting. Maybe this will come up in your thoughts on the kind of, the value of intuition and all that. But you said there's black and white thinking or perspectivism? What is perspectivism exactly?
So you have sort of absolutism, like black and white thinking on one hand.
Yeah, okay.
Then you have extreme relativism, like it's all your opinion, man, nothing matters. And then perspectivism is saying, and this is one of your videos you had Anne McGill. No, it wasn't Anne McGill. Sorry, it was George Lakoff, who actually pulled one of his books in case that comes up, but it's bottom of the stack. And I actually met him when I was in grad school. He gave a talk, so I got to
That's
meet him.
awesome.
But anyways, you had one of these talks where he was talking about like different frames, and I don't think I'd heard him talking about that, but I have actually been talking a lot about frameworks, and one of my best performing videos is because that's what I've realized. And the Matt Terodor distinction is something that I only have one video on, but it's something that I talk about a lot in person, because it is like you have these different sort of frameworks that represent different maps of both different portions of the territory and different ways of navigating the same territory. And so perspectivism is basically recognizing it's not all like completely relative, like different.
It actually is, though. That actually is exactly what perspectivism is. It is completely relative. Knowledge is entirely determined by the construction and the relations that make up what we call the subject. That is entirely what it is. What are you talking about? You are saying, in your account of perspectivism, that there is a thing that transcends perspective in perspectivism. That would make it not perspectivism.
There's an underlying reality, and there's also, John Searle's idea of social reality?
Vaguely. Is Searle the one that has like the Searle Chinese character experiment?
The Searle Chinese room test.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah. And I've actually I've been
It's not the Chinese room test. It's not the Chinese room test.
Describing LLMs to people as slime molds in a Chinese room, because basically the level of complexity is at the slime mold level, but they seem
What is he talking about?
more complex because they're using vocabulary in the way that like a person in the Chinese room would be. But anyways, so Searle
That made no sense.
have this idea. You have social reality, which is created by our agreement that social reality is reality. And I actually wrote a blog post because I realized I think you actually have two different levels of social reality, because you have the
Okay. Now what you might have gathered, chat, because my audience is smarter than this, thank God, is that what he's described is literally completely relative. It is completely relative. You have turned it into an agreement. Okay, an agreement between subjects. On what terms? For whom? It is subject to that agreement.
That's the kind of
Oh my
irresponsible
God.
spending that causes so many business ventures to fail. You're forgetting the third rule.
At Richard McCrory_Neff super chatted $13.47. Guilty as charged. Several years ago got excessively attached to the finding I was an INFJ on Myers-Briggs. Another corporate sinkhole for people's mental bandwidth.
Hey, I like Myers-Briggs, okay? It tells me I'm really good at chess, even though I'm not.
what you would call the brute social reality of this is the facts on the ground. And so Searle argues social reality needs language, but brute social reality doesn't. And all sort of individualized social animals have brute social reality.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have the formal social reality, which is stuff that the facts on the ground create. And so an example would be like a currency. We all agree this is money, and so it becomes money because we all agree it's money.
This is a ChatGPT level analysis of the book.
And it can work in both the formal, like if you...
So one of the things, and this is kind of really important to get, okay? It is impossible to read what he claims to read. And I mean it's impossible. And I'm going to explain why. Why?
Like if you don't do anything...
Why? I've noticed Chrome's been doing this lately. It'll just like jump my cursor out of the search bar. This is impossible. And I mean this seriously. This is impossible. He is not reading these. We know he's not reading these because the books aren't his. He inherited these from his father. He is literally just going onto the shelf, picking up a stack, going to ChatGPT, having it generate an analysis. It says nothing, but he gets to wave around the books and talk for however many minutes. And that's it. But the thing of it is, though, is that he's holding up 40 years of reading here with no theme, no focus, no topic. 40 years of reading. And you can do the math on this. And by the way, a lot of them are books by YouTubers. Here's The Populist Delusion by the academic agent in his hand. Which means he's picking things based upon what will game the algorithm. You do not read things in advance for months based on what will game the algorithm. If I were to read this shitty YouTuber's book, The Populist Delusion, for which I would need to have some background in, for example, James Burnham, okay? Certain types of kooky, problematic, and wrong, but nonetheless serious enough that you cannot skim them, theorists, it would take me a few weeks. Because I'm careful and I read things. But also because it's boring. And because it's long. It's a couple hundred pages. I think this one might be a little bit shorter, like maybe like a little bit over 100 pages. But he's holding 3 books just in this one thing. 3 accounts of what's wrong with the world and how to fix it. Like, this is comical. This is comical. Here he has a stack of books, including Seeing Like a State, Anti-Fragile, just a bunch of stuff. And lo and behold, the only one, we reviewed this a little while ago, the only one he has actually, like, anything to say about is the conservative one, is the Jonathan Haidt one. Because he hasn't read these. This is somebody else's library. He's literally monetizing the corpse of his father's passion. It is so weird.
If you don't do anything, the brute social reality will govern formal social reality. Formal social reality has the power to rewrite brute social reality, but only to a degree. And formal social reality can, with enough, sometimes underwrite, basic reality a little bit by like engineering, but really.
Is he trying to read himself as like a reading savant? Yes. And there are very stupid people who are really, really hungry to listen to someone pretending to be a reading savant. And it's so weird. Imagine someone in their 30s pretending to be like an expert sports player of some kind. And just pretending, just to know about the sport, just endlessly, just making content about it. Giving you advice, what equipment to buy, etc. And you find out that they've never played. They'd never talked about it until the year they started that channel. And it was all just this weird LARP. It's really bizarre. This is going to get funny, by the way.
Reality is what it is. And so perspectivism is realizing like you have all these different maps. Social reality contains maps of both the underlying reality and maps of itself, like recursively. And so, and I think there's like different levels of different, but a perspectivism, like I was always sort of inclined towards it, but I've gotten better at it. And so Spiral Dynamics, this is the original book.
You know what Spiral Dynamics is? Fun fact. They know about me. Let me tell you what Spiral Dynamics is, okay? Just by illustration. This is Spiral Dynamics. They have a Reddit. Is President Sunday at Stage Yellow? Anyone want to introduce Spiral Dynamics and integral theory to him? What about ContraPoints? Opinions, please, people. So this is effectively a more sophisticated version of Brittany Simon's levels theory. But they like my video, so you know what? I bet they're at the very least Stage Yellow.
Sort of Ken Wilber adapted it. You tend to have what you
He has
call
the hardcover too. He has the hardcover. This is some weirdo with too much disposable income who's just trying to just fake it till he makes it. And I don't think, to be clear, I don't think he thinks he's lying. I think this guy actually thinks that he is comprehending the contents of what he's talking about by having AI summarize it for him. I think that's the level. I think that is legitimately what he's doing. I think he is actually delusional to that point. I think the pink hairbrush he's combing his luxurious mane with throughout this is sort of speaking to that.
All sort of autistic thinking at blue, which is these are the rules, and orange, these are the rules about how you figure out the rules. And then you have extreme relativism at green. And then you have a shift towards second order thinking, which tends to be perspectivist at yellow, where you suddenly realize, oh, there's different maps, like there's an underlying reality, and they were trying to navigate it, and we'll never completely understand it. But it's not like it's all your opinion, man. Like people prefer a different map because they have reasons for preferring different maps. That makes sense.
Yes, it sounds like
It's magical.
like John Vervaeke's term of transjectivity. There's the objective world or objectivity.
I'm getting group chat clout vibes. That is an excellent way to put it. That is exactly what's going on. This is group chat clout. That's what this is. That is what this is. And here is the thing, like, these spiral dynamics people don't realize they've essentially fallen into the most rote kind of mechanistic schematizing where you just obsessively reduce the very thing that supposedly you are using to reduce this into various spatialized segments. So you've essentially fascised your own intelligence. It is very weird.
There's subjective world or subjectivity, which is like all your opinion. But then there's a real relationship between the real objective world and then the subjects within it, which you could say is opinion and all that. And that relationship is transjective. And that seems like a very dark centrist middle ground. So and maybe you can connect this to your thoughts broadly, because you said you'd been thinking about autism, or excuse me, you're thinking about intuition and the role of intuition. And, you know, I draw that dichotomy between like autism is non-intuitive and intuition is obviously autistic people have intuition. But, you know, I think the problem nowadays is we over-index on, well, logically, I can't come up with a reason not to, so that must be the right thing, when actually people should listen to their intuition. So broadly speaking, what are your thoughts on the value of intuition and the necessity of it epistemologically, and maybe how that relates to like political disagreements or you know, disputes people see or whatnot? But
So I'm a big fan of Idris Shah. Have you heard of Idris Shah?
Idris Shah?
Idris Shah, yeah.
I think maybe you might have emailed me, but no, I don't think anything other than that. Go ahead.
So I group him. I call him one of the three Englishmen, along with G.K. Chesterton and C.S. Lewis, because they all had sort of similar perspectives, but were different religions, right? Because Chesterton was Catholic, Lewis was Anglican, and Idris Shah is Muslim, although he's Sufi, so very unorthodox, heterodox Muslim. And he wrote a lot of books sort of trying to present like a de-Islamized Sufism for a popular Western audience, but he also wrote a lot of books on understanding. And I love this book, which is called Reflections. It's a bunch of like little, but I think the intuition stuff actually comes from his book, Learning How to Learn, which there's a 4-page chapter, which is like one of the best 4 pages I've ever read, talking about how basically like most of the modern world is an attention economy, and people don't realize that. And so they're.
Yeah, I'm sure Idris Shah, the Sufi, was like, yeah, most of the world is an attention economy, actually, guys.
They're giving away their attention to the wrong things, and they're also trying to attract the wrong kinds of attention. But anyways, so he talks.
That's not an attention economy. That's just the fact of people using attention. That's not the same thing.
About I think it's Learning How to Learn, that basically, but he talks about intuition a bit in Reflections as well. But that
if you are not in a society, for example, with a media system that is accessible and monetizable, you don't have an attention economy. An attention economy, very specifically, is the integration of a media apparatus that is capable of drawing attention and the affects of people who engage with that, and the interchange between those and like money. You can turn that into commodities. That's the point. It's an actual it's an attention economy. There is a limited amount of attention to go around. It's social. Human beings directing their attention to the wrong thing, that's an ethical question. That has nothing to do with an attention economy.
Intuition in the English language, we treat intuition as being the same thing as sort of an emotional gut knee-jerk reaction. And he's like, well, no, intuition is you're stripping away both the logical conscious reasoning and like the emotional knee-jerk reaction. And it's basically, it's sort of the implicit knowledge that you've learned. Mm-hmm. And my friends, so there's a lot of different, there's a lot of these different developmental levels. And one interesting one that my friend, her therapist, showed her.
There are mental levels. This is a person who sits on his computer all day and looks at Myers-Briggs and he's like, yes, I am a mastermind. What other famous individuals are also INTJs? Why, yes, I, like Napoleon, also did poorly in school.
So you have, you know what you know what you don't know. And the friend's therapist said that's where she was, which I would agree with. You don't know what you don't know, which is where the St. Nicholas Taleb, who I talk a lot about in Black Swan, sort of focuses. And then you don't know what you know. And that's sort of when you're developing intuition. And that's where I've gotten, like, only recently, where I've been much more willing to be like, yeah, my gut's telling me to do this, so I'm going to trust my gut and I'm going to follow it further than I would, even if other people are like, why are you doing this? And so, I mean, one thing
there are no other people.
Point out is I am diagnosed with autism, but I was also...
I just got back. What the fuck is this? Well, he's telling us. He's trusting his gut. He has very poor judgment.
Most people like me, when I was diagnosed, would have been diagnosed with ADHD or nothing. I just happened to have... The first time that I had trouble in school was with my 5th grade teacher. She would give assignments that had a literal and common sense meaning. And then I would do the literal meaning because that was the only one I could see. And she used to say, don't be a smart act, use your common sense. And I'm like...
Autism does not preclude you from understanding connotation. Polar magpie? I would say both.
What? I only see this one.
Listen, we're Nietzscheans here, right? Your gut's always in charge.
And so I ended up getting diagnosed with autism at a time when most people like me would have been diagnosed with ADHD or would not have been diagnosed with anything.
I know one of the more popular videos on your channel is about gender identity, and your...
Hold on to your seatbelts, ladies and gentlemen, and everything in between and outside. We are about to embark on a journey.
As an autistic person, how do you think? Because my
read on him, by the way, was that, like the rest of his content, his take on gender and his living as a non-binary person thing, his like, let's find the exact title so we don't mess this up, okay? Reading is a skill, gender. This is the one that we first learned about on. This got 115,000 views. These 9 books are why I no longer identify as non-binary. That's where that came up. And I made the observation, or I made the assertion, that I am pretty confident that this was made up in order to game the algorithm. Because it's kind of perfect. You have an autistic person. Trans people are often cast as autistic people who have been misled. Okay? They were confused. They didn't understand. So they were led down a pipeline, and then the evil medical doctors cut their boobs off, etc., etc. These 9 books, this is how I can intellectually prove that transness is a sham. It's kind of perfect. And moreover, he's going to demonstrate that he's basically the weirdest, but at the same time, the most normal Jordan Peterson type acolyte. You'll see in a minute. You'll see.
And a conception would be, using the autism schizophrenia framework, would be this fixation on pronouns, this fixation on like identity. I identify as X, and that therefore I am that. It's a very like, it's very autistic because it's very much, well, I say that I am, or I believe that I am, and therefore I am. And it leaves out all of the, well, what you are is also partly socially negotiated, and what people recognize you at, and like all the context you're in and all that. But what is your kind of like, what is your experience with gender identity? I know you said you were confused and then kind of read some books that came out of it. So how did you?
So
go
I will say
that?
I've noticed like pretty much all autistic women and the majority of autistic men I've met have struggled with gender because their neurotypical people have expectations for this is how gender is supposed to work. And it's a combination of we either don't want to do these things or we don't want to do them literally the way they're saying, or it seems like impossible to do it the way they're saying. And so I've had like pressure when I was a kid. On one hand, there was my mother who was an ardent like second wave feminist, and all her sort of grievances about like sort of male things that, you know, feminists would say are male entitlement that she was trying to teach me like as a boy not to do, that I often couldn't do, that I'm realizing some of them were cases are probably unrealistic. There really are gender differences between men and women, but also a lot of it was like she was blaming like ADHD and autism stuff on gender as well. And then on the other hand, you had especially the woman who ran the after school program who was like, you're a boy, you need to act like a boy, you need to do all these things boys do that mostly I didn't want to do. But only a few of them like I still don't want to do. Most of them are things that I'm happy to do now when it's not someone like demanding I do them as a boy and I'm not getting why. So like, for example, I don't believe in stoicism. We could have a whole conversation about that, but I am more stoic, like if that makes sense, like in the like the lay sense, or like that and so, but just that pressure like at the time I was both conflicting because on one hand my mother was blaming all these things that she didn't like about me on me being a boy.
Wait for it.
And on the other hand, teachers and such, but especially that woman who ran the after school program really were like, you need to be more normal. You need to go do like physical rough and tumble with the boys, go play with the boys. And I'm like, I don't want to do any of that. And that's still, and it's interesting because when I read Robin Dunbar's book Friends, where he talks a fair bit about gender, I realized like a lot of the things he was saying I was often questioning, and then I realized, yeah, no, I actually do like most of the male things, or I have my inclination that way. It's just that there are often exceptions, or it's not quite the way he describes. And the only real case where I tend more towards the female pattern is that men generally prefer to work out their feelings by like just doing stuff together and not talking about it. And I very much like talking about my feelings. But that's really the only way, like in terms of these various patterns that Dunbar described, where it's not even like, yeah, I fit the male pattern. I'm like, I fit the male pattern for sort of a different definition, and I fit it better than I fit like the standard female pattern. And so I think you have this pressure, and you have these people telling you you're like, especially for women, like you're not doing girl right, you're not being a woman right. And then for men, boys too, to some degree. And so I think there's that pressure to, both the pressure to be the gender right, and then also for me as like a man, there's also the, oh, men are bad and don't. And it's certainly like I grew up in the 90s and you had like all that girl boss feminism. Women can be anything, but it wasn't, men can be anything, which is a point Bell Hooks raised that I cried when I read chapter 7, because she was acknowledging things that I had experienced but hadn't like recognized, hadn't let myself recognize consciously. But the other thing I think is autistic people, especially if you get to the point that you are diagnosable autistic, because there are people who seem autistic or at least like broad autism phenotype, but their lives are fine. They have everything kind of in order. And I think as we've moved to sort of a more, about managerialism, the managerial revolution?
Right winger. This is from James Burnham. The actual content, the actual literature that this guy consumes is right-wing, anti-left screeds. That's where this guy actually comes from. You're going to see it come out. It's going to get weird.
I think broadly, I understand the general concept and how people use it.
So as the economy has become more managerialized, like it's become less and less friendly to people who are even a little bit weird. And so like I realized I'm basically the same as my father. But my father had, really no problems, with unemployment and like limited problems with dating. And then eventually found my mother and then the divorce, able to date again. And then my grandfather had even fewer problems. And so it becomes more and more problematic as the economy becomes less and less friendly to any degree of weirdness. And so autistic people who are going to get diagnosed autistic tend to have stuff in their lives that isn't working, mostly because it's not fitting in with, like, we're not able, difficulty supporting ourselves, getting the job to support ourselves, and or difficulty finding partners. And so it becomes, well, if you're not happy with your life, could it be gender? And something that's fascinating I've noticed is, so I don't know if you do like the sort of the thought experiment that a lot of people use to ask your trans of, hey, if you had the opportunity to like swap to like a perfectly cisgender body of the opposite sex, would you take it? And my answer was always, I would try it if I could swap back. Whereas,
Are you hot? And that's kind of a factor.
there are a lot of people who I interpreted as perfectly cisgender who would be like, yes, absolutely, I would take it. And so many of like
Reactionary is giving him way too much credit. No, he's reactionary in his consumption habits. The stuff that he has actually read is stuff that you'll get from like Sargon adjacent YouTube. I recognize a lot of these names and a lot of these things.
the ones I'm still in track of have pretty much all been diagnosed with autism at this point.
The question never specified cisgender, yeah.
And so I think it's a lot of it is there's a combination of being pressured to perform gender in ways that just don't either, again, autistic people don't do gender in quite the same way as neurotypical people, or it is sort of within line with neurotypical people, but the way people are defining it, we think it's not. And it's like, how do I do this? Combined with if your life isn't working well and like you're failing, like, you feel like a failure as a man, you feel like a failure as a woman, whatever, then maybe it's the other way around that might work. And I think a lot of it is you like see autistic men like, and it's like, well, you're supposed to be like on top of things and I'm not, and maybe it would be easier as a woman. Autistic women are like, well, it's supposed to have male privilege, and maybe if I had that, I'd have an easier time. And so I think it's sort of that combination of at least those three things for a lot of, again, even autistic people who do not identify as trans or non-binary, these gender issues are very, very common. And obviously there's much higher rates of autistic people identifying as trans or non-binary. And so again, I think that's the pressure to conform to things where the way we do gender isn't normal. The pressure to do things where it kind of is normal, but it's just we don't understand, extreme literalism. And then if your life isn't well, then it's maybe, a change is as good as a rest, or not. That's not quite what I'm looking for. But you know what I mean?
Yeah. So I'll tell you, I was watching Love on the Spectrum. I don't know if you've seen that. Have you seen that by any chance? It's like
Just to be clear, by the way, trans people are not majority autistic. Just to be clear. It's like 1/10 of trans people are autistic. There is overlap. Trans people are more likely to be autistic than the general population. But the way this is being framed is if it's like, oh yeah, autistic people, yeah, they're all trans. Trans people are all autistic. It's not the case.
reality dating show with autistic people.
I know what it is, but I haven't seen it.
Okay.
Okay, good to know. Sunday. Hey, present company excluded.
Okay. And I was watching it with my friend and his wife, and my friend's wife.
That was a joke.
She has like a social work background, and she knows about
Obviously, the Present Sunday channel is an additional filter.
autism. And one of the things I noticed in that show, and I've noticed this with autistic people I know, that they can be very almost.
Are they linked? No. There's a correlation. So there's statistical overlap. That's all. That's all. This is a basic thing they teach you in first year sociology. Don't conflate correlation with causation. The fact that there is overlap between two populations does not mean that belonging to one or the other is caused by the other one. Basically.
Performative.
That dude needs to be taught about camera angles. What are you talking about? This is how you intimidate the solo.
In their like very exaggerated, like, oh mercy me, like what have I done? You know, they'll be like very expressive.
So it's a dominant angle.
Almost like they're acting like for like a movie or whatnot. And I remember I asked her, like, is that like a common thing with autistic people where they because they kind of literalize, or because they can kind of like fixate and narrow focus, they'll see like they'll see a movie where something bad happens, and then they'll see the character kind of express like, oh no, like, oh goodness me. And then anytime something bad happens to that autistic person in real life, they default to that imitation thing. They have a hard time like, or they're
Let me tell you something. You cannot generalize across autistic people, because autistic people range widely, from the incredibly intelligent and the sensitive and the perspicacious to the not. Because it turns out autistic people are people. And autism is actually not a virus or a gene that you can identify and on that basis determine what capacities a person will have or what proclivities they will have. It's almost like these categories are heavily fraught and outdated.
very imitative, like kind of one-to-one literal imitative. And my friend's wife was like, yes, that's like a very common pattern with autistic people. And so like with the gender thing, I could see like, oh, we fixate on, oh, you know, because I'm a man or I'm a male and I don't particularly fit with other men here, I'm going to hyperfixate the other direction because I've seen
I
women,
would even say it's not a disorder. I would ask what the hell is supposed to be in order.
you know, like talk about their feelings or whatever. So therefore I'm going to literally become a woman because I'm, you know, going to adopt that perspective rather than just be able to kind of subtly operate between both. What do you think of that whole idea?
I think there could be some of that, but it's probably going to be, and I guess I should also started acknowledging it, but it's one of those things that it's socially inappropriate to acknowledge, is I'm also gifted. And so
I told you it's going to get good. I told you it's going to get good.
most, you tend to associate with people like you. So most of the autistic people I know are gifted, and I don't know any of them who would have that kind of reaction. But I think if you have autistic people who are sort of average to below average intelligence, you might see that kind of thing. But again, I haven't seen the people I know, but they're also not necessarily completely representative of autism. But the thing you're
Guys, listen, you went to AP English in high school, okay?
talking about, but like echolalia, like I knew a kid when I was in middle school and high school who basically he spoke entirely in movie quotes. So he'd say, "Well, your name," and then he would like quote some movie, and that was how he talked. And I think
That didn't happen.
I do that too. Like I have, sort of obsessive thoughts running through my head sometimes, right? And sometimes those will be like quotes, and so I will want to do them. Have you seen the cartoon Archer?
I know of it. I know I've seen some episodes, but I'm not super familiar.
So they keep joking that the main character Archer is autistic, and it's funny because most people, like when you say that, they'll be like, "No, he doesn't seem autistic
Guys, he's like Archer.
at all," and I'm like, he really fits well with like a certain kind of autistic person that you meet, and I completely can believe he's autistic even though it's presented as a joke.
No, that's a cartoon, Magpie. That is a cartoon. That's a cartoon character. That is a cartoon spy.
And one of the things that he will do is he will like obsessively like need to say danger zone in certain consequences, also phrasing in certain consequences. So it's like Michael Scott with the,
Johnny Bravo, famous autistic icon.
that's what she said. Only for Archer, it's phrasing.
Yes. Oh, yes. Interesting.
Oh, mama.
I had one more thing on the gender identity thing. Oh, I guess you said you read some books that changed your opinions on things. I mean,
Oh, boy.
were you of the opinion that you were non-binary, or that gender didn't exist, or what exactly? What was the kind of propositional conclusion you had come to related to gender, and
So
then how did you change your mind on it?
So I spent most of my life since puberty sort of switching back and forth between I'm reasonably comfortable identifying as a boy or a man, and I don't know what's going on with my gender. I don't feel like I'm a woman, but I don't want to be a boy or a man. And what I've realized basically is when I feel like I could, perform masculinity well, like or I was capable of like taking control of my life and, possibly finding romantic partners and all that, right? Just the fact like I could perform agency, because you know about agency and communion?
Agency in communion?
And communion.
Communion, the sacrament, or
No, so it's agency and communion are like the two fundamental human social motivations, and once you see them, they start showing up everywhere.
Oh,
Yeah, that's how snake oil works. That's like every single cult schematization known to man. He's specifically actually working from oh shit, what's his name? Man's Search for Meaning. It's on the tip of my tongue. What is this guy's name? Frankl? Viktor Frankl? So what this guy does is he cannibalizes his father's library and then pretends like he read a bunch of stuff when actually what he read, because he's a Petersonian right-wing dweeb, is a bunch of stuff that will tell you, hey you're not one of those wishy-washy feely types. That's because you're autistic and therefore smarter and more analytic and more stoic, and you're gifted and you're smart. And it's just endlessly looking for anything that tells you you're special. You're special. Just imagine if you had like a cold racist grandpa, but he just sat you on his knee every single night and was just like, you're special. You are the chosen one. You are the Lisan al-Gaib.
interesting.
Like,
Okay.
For Frankl, Mankind's Search for Meaning.
Yes. Yeah. That's one of my favorite
There
books.
we go.
Basically, so he's sort of describing like three ways we find meaning, and two of them are sort of easy to understand. They're basically agency and communion. And then the third one is the one that the whole book is trying to describe.
Guess which one's men and which one's women.
And where sort of how you find meaning when you can't really exercise agency.
Is that attitudinal or something? Is the third dimension or something?
I think so, yeah.
Okay.
And so it's also, like I mentioned, spiral dynamics. And I like the original book better than Wilbur's version because the warm colors represent agency drives. So it's the desire to achieve, to sort of master the world. And the cool colors represent communion. And Wilbur took that out in his reinterpretation of it. I feel like that's missing something really important because I do think we tend to sort of shift back and forth. And I do know Martin Buber, I Am Thou.
Mm-mm.
So that's another famous
How the fuck do you not know Martin Buber? You're like a Peterson guy. Whatever.
book that you might want to read, especially if you like Frankl's Mankind's Search for Meaning. But he basically argues we have the I-it relation, which is our desire to understand, to master, control, and the I-thou relation, which is our desire to like connect and commune, which also fits with Arthur Koestler's idea of holons, where so
It's Arthur Kessler.
the self-asserting principle, facing down, you're trying to sort of control. Self-transcending principle.
Once again, like this guy, I'm telling you, the only way you would do this at this incredible level of incompetence is you would have ChatGPT summarize it for you and connect them. And that's what he's done. And I legitimately think he doesn't realize that that's weird. He doesn't realize that it's incredibly stupid to just have AI just generate for you summaries like that's reading stuff and then to pretend you actually read the stuff afterwards. It's just babble. No, it's not just babble. It's not just babble. There is a system. It's a system that is built between fundamentally incompatible material that he has not read. It is impossible.
Facing up, you want to be part of something bigger. Again, it shows up in a lot of cases. And the reason I am bringing...
Let me tell you something. Actually reading stuff carefully, an essay, an article should take you basically a day, minimum. Minimum. Basically a day. If you are reading entire books in a week, either they are very slim, very easy books, and that's an important distinction, because slim does not mean fast. Sometimes things that are slim are very dense. If you are reading James C. Scott in a week, and James C. Scott is not hard, you're not. You're not. I'm curious to know if he has a video on how he's skilled at reading. No, he does not. I would love to see him stream an analysis live. Just show us how he does it. Show us how he does it. How fast? Richard, it's Buber. I've got a copy. I've got the Walter Kaufman translation on my wall. I don't know if there's another translation actually.
Bringing this up is because basically, so everyone needs both. but generally men tend to prioritize agency values and the culture.
By the way, this is not how you read stuff. You do not go, oh, this author presented me with a schema. That obviously just explains the world. I'll just adopt that. No. No, you hold that provisionally when you're reading that author. But you assume it's wrong until you have a particular reason to think it actually extends beyond that author's context. Is the Kaufman translation also weird for Buber? I couldn't tell you.
Sure, rewards men most for like expressing agency, and women tend to prioritize communion values, and the culture rewards women for
Sure.
communion values. And so basically, sorry, that was a bit of a digression to explain this, but basically, whenever I felt like I had no agency over my life would be when I'm like, well, I can't be a man, I don't want to be a man, but I also don't want to be threatening. Like most of my friends are women, right? And men are threatening to women, right? And
Friend, I have some good news for you.
so I want to just be something else. As a friend of mine said, so basically when you're feeling emasculated, you don't want to be a man. I'm like, yeah, that's basically it. And so I realized that's what was happening, but it took me a while. And so
I love this. I love this. Oh, well, women are pathetic, and I'm pathetic. But of course. What an incredibly weird thing to say. So, just to translate a little bit. So basically, he thinks women are weak and unable. And he associates that with himself. And so that is the reason for his gender confusion. Which is interesting.
I started identifying as non-binary because, again, know a lot of autistic people, and a lot of people I knew were transitioning, coming out as trans in around 2016, 2017.
I don't believe you knew a lot of them. I don't believe this happened in 2016, 2017. I don't believe you. I don't believe you talk to people about their gender issues. I'm listening to you talk now, and I'm telling you, I do not believe you could leave that room fast enough to evade physical violence. Was P.F. Young lured into this conversation exclusively because of the "these books made me stop being non-binary" video? Probably. But P.F. Young, like Paul, is functionally brain dead. Like he's got an eraser for a brain. He's trying to do the. This is a fake Peterson fan. That was his initial grift. That's why it's called P.F. Young, who attempted to glaze Destiny for a little while, and he's trying to be Lex Friedman, but he has significantly less wit and charisma, which, let me tell you, is a sentence.
And so, which I think was when, so I think it was like, 2017, I think was when I identified as non-binary, and 2024 was when very start of 2025 was when I stopped. And so I was like, people would be asking like to explain trans issues. And of course I looked a lot into this because I knew
people go to him. Magpie, explain trans issues for us. Explain performativity, God damn it, or I swear to God.
My experience was not the experience trans people describe. And so I started explaining it to like the cis people asking these questions. And I was like, okay, well, it's very clear I'm not like a cis person because I've looked into this and I have knowledge about it, but I'm also clearly not trans because I don't relate to these things that I'm saying that the trans.
Okay. Just FYI, if you're not cis, you are trans. By definition. By definition. You are either cis or you're trans. There is no other. That is the binary. If you are cis, you match your gender assigned at birth. Your sex assigned at birth. Your gender matches your sex assigned at birth. If you are trans, it does not. That is all. That is all. Sir and or madam, when you say you have read about this, I do not believe you.
Trans people who are like, some of them were thanking me for like, thank you for taking this. So I was describing their feelings well. So this isn't me. And I'm like, well, I'm going to sort of identify as non-binary as basically a placeholder because I don't.
That means you're trans. That's what that means. Now you, because you're actually a conservative sexist, you've assumed that trans means you're a transvestite. You've assumed it means you're the confused uncle in a 90s sitcom who wears a dress for a day as a fad, as a joke. That is not what that means.
I don't feel comfortable being a man, but I'm clearly not a woman, and I'll just figure it out later. And one of the things that sort of got me questioning that again is I realized because people generally, they hear non-binary and they assume, you know, biological female with a short haircut, right? And so I would, when I say non-binary, I would often feel like I had to clarify that I was, you know, biologically male non-binary to make sure like I wasn't misleading people. And then
Okay.
I started realizing I was starting to, after my father died, sort of start leaning in towards like, you know, biologically male, non-binary, biologically male, non-binary, biologically male, why am I having a hard time saying this? Biologically male, non-binary.
No, get it right. If you stutter, it doesn't count.
Like stereotypes.
You're automatically cis.
Yeah.
And so I got my ears pierced, and I started experimenting with painting my nails. And then I was thinking about, should I dye
He's basically Brooks, isn't he?
my hair? And that's when I was like, wait a second,
Wait a minute. That's what that Brooks guy does.
I'm just starting to lean into all of these stereotypes. I did it to try to not be in a box, and then I'm putting myself in a box over this, and that's when I sort of started.
That occurred to you when you thought of dyeing your hair. You put a hole in your body, but it occurred to you when you considered dyeing your hair.
Started re-questioning it, but I wasn't like actively looking for answers until, as I mentioned in my video. So I read all towards the end of 24. I read the latest Shauna Maguire book, Alison Bechdel's Fun Home, and then I started really questioning, wait, why have I been sort of not wanting to be male, and why have I not wanted to identify with male? Because I identified, like, especially with Bechdel, it's like
This is giving just the strongest non-marathon running Jason Arty vibes.
I was like, I totally identify with this from just the opposite direction.
This is all made up. Oh, it's 100% all made up. None of this happened. This weirdo has done nothing with his life. He plays video games and he surfs the internet and he watches right-wing losers. And then he decided, oh, I inherited a big library from my dad. I could look really smart and cool to the right-wing weirdos, to the weirdos online. I'll just look, this ChatGPT, it just writes it for you. Wow, I don't need to read the books. It just tells me what's in them. I'm an INTJ. I'm autistic. I can do this. That's what it is. 100%. 100% that's what this is. But the problem you're up against, though, is that the kind of moron who falls for this has never read anything before. They don't understand what that entails. They think it's magic. They think there's a special enlightened kind of person who reads stuff, and then they, the main characters, know the imperialists, the Imperials, and on the Morrowind character selection screen. They don't read stuff. They defer to the people who read stuff, and they're like wizards, and they tell them things, and they act on it. Those people have no idea of how implausible it is that this person has read any of the stuff that he claims to have read, and they have therefore never engaged with anything more complicated than a news article, so they can't tell that he's speaking nonsense. I am an Aquarius, thank you. And an INTJ, apparently. Bow before me. My elo is solely because of my depression, I promise you, okay? When I'm on game, I'm like a solid 1100.
From her issues, although she obviously never identified as non-binary, so I know she's always identified as a woman. And then I was like, well, my father was reading Bell Hooks when he died, looked it up, and I'm like, oh, he's probably reading this one, Men, Masculine, and the Will to Change. Or the...
Wait, this doesn't say anything about writing a will.
Both the change, Men, Masculinity, and whatever it is. So I...
You're too disorganized to be an INTJ according to the 16 personalities, because I am actually extremely organized. What I am, unfortunately, is pulling along a bunch of dysfunctional people like Gandalf pulling along hobbits. You don't understand. You don't understand. Okay? If I had, like, a secretary and a team of Oompa Loompas, I'd be running this joint.
I read that one, as I said, chapter 7, I was like, oh, wow, this is sort of explaining, because it was the woman who ran the after-school program and was like, you need to be more of a boy. I don't think she was a feminist. But my mother certainly was sort of pushing me towards, don't do these things that are often autism and ADHD, but like blaming them on being like male entitlement. And then like I had a lot of feminist women who were telling me like in feminist spaces.
Okay, just wait for this. Okay, guys, listen. Just listen to this. Okay, this guy. This is an experience he had, okay? This guy.
Don't do these things that are often autism and ADHD, but like blaming them on being like male entitlement. And then like I had a lot of feminist women who were telling me like in feminist spaces, like you need to be more, live up to these male stereotypes, like in defense of feminism. Like
the feminist women, okay? They went up to him. They're like, listen, Magpie. You're tainted, okay? You've got the male taint, but we need you to embrace it. We need you to be our toxic male. We need you to be as masculine as you can in defense of feminism. You are the arbiter. Let me tell you something, fellas. If you ever approach, especially an older feminist who tells you they're a feminist, and you ask them if you should do that, you will remember not to the next time. You will learn very quickly what a dominance hierarchy actually looks like.
you need to, one of the things they point out is they'd be like, you need to be more aggressive, like defending feminism, because they, like, men won't listen to women, they'll only listen to other men, so you need to go out and fight.
It's up to you. It's up to you, Magpie. Go do it. We are only women. You were given this burden. Greatness was thrust upon you. I need to be very careful. I shouldn't be rude in a certain way. But just like, I'm sorry, with all due respect. He was talking about himself being threatening earlier. And I just really don't think you go outside that often.
With them, and I'm like, well,
Like I'm gonna level with you, Magpie. I think if you were like on a dating show or something, Wick would give you a run for your money. I think you'd have to fight really hard. I mean, the most damning thing is he acts like he looks. Now you're getting that is a deeply unkind sentence, but also correct.
first of all, like men listen to people they respect regardless of gender. Like I was in.
By the way, this guy, just FYI, someone who looks like this but actually reads stuff and knows stuff and has the correct takes and has like some level of moral strength, that is a badass. That is someone really cool. This person operating at the level of this guy on the other side, but with ChatGPT to help pretend, is like the... It's not a place you want to land. I know, like, we like to tell people, like, you know, you're all... Every one of you has a place. Every one of you has something to offer. There are people who don't. Which does not mean that they are not valid to exist, etc., etc. But it does mean the only appropriate response to I am gifted is to say yes. Yes, you are. Now, can you please continue stocking the shelves? Thank you.
A server that friend of mine, female friend of mine, invited me to. She was the only woman. It was the first time I'd been in such an overwhelming male space, like voluntarily. And it was like they clearly...
I was always a little scared of all cis men, to be honest. I mean, to be fair, if they make it known that they're cis men, there's very frequently something weird going on. There is nothing wrong with being straight. There is very frequently something very off, just in terms of demeanor, about men who make you aware that they are straight. Because people who are secure and not insecure, and therefore weird about their sexuality, don't need to inform you.
They respected her a lot more than they respected me because they knew her. But then the other thing is, like, you look at all these scandals with male feminists, and they're always, you know, they're doing what these feminists say they want, right? Is they're aggressively, like, going out and picking fights over, like, defending feminism, but they're all...
That's what, yeah, that's a fan. It's exactly what, that's what they say. It's Donna Haraway. Yes, now we are seeing the men of today are doing exactly, finally, what we feminists wanted them to do. They are going out and picking fights on behalf of feminism. Thank you, men. Thank God the men are finally here to save us. That's what the feminists are saying. Like, it's the kind of sentence you can smell. You know what I'm saying?
also predatory towards their own community because that aggression isn't just limited to the opponents. It's limited, it goes towards everyone.
Oh yeah, he needs to be careful. He has so much power, so much male power. All right, it's like Paul Atreides. He sees too much.
And but I never wanted to, and I realized, oh, this kind of like, I was getting this double standard from a lot of women who identified as feminists, and I realized, like, I had always defended feminism against anti-feminists, and they'd say, well, feminists do this and this and this. I'd be like, okay, but feminist theory says this. And of course it was, you know, the liberal feminist theory that I read, because obviously radical feminist theory is very different, although I'd read that too. And
he read radical feminist theory, friends. He's read it. He just read it. He's read it all. I too have read radical feminist theory. It's a great book.
I realized, well, yeah, liberal feminist theory says
Well, I skimmed it.
that, but as Bell Hooks said, basically in fact, like most of the women I know refuse to identify as feminists because they're like, well, the women who identify as feminists, have these double standards and sort of make it all about them. Like they support the things that feminism has achieved for them in terms of equality. And I realized like like in my mother's generation, basically every educated woman identified as a feminist, right? So like a lot of the women who supported me were feminists as well. But like in my generation, like the women who sort of undermine my self-confidence and stuff all identified as feminists. The women who supported me pretty much all used to identify as feminists. And I'm like,
Yeah.
But anyways, so I forget what the question was.
He forgets what the question was. He's gifted, you see. He's operating at a higher level. Okay. You know how like Dr. Manhattan just like loses, normal interaction skills? He's so gifted he can't remember the initial question. He's just too smart.
Oh, no. This is fine. I mean, just trying to understand more about your kind of experience with gender in general as an autistic person. But
I don't think bell hooks is radical. Am I wrong? It depends on what you mean. She's not exactly. She's not. Let me put it this way: she's not scum manifesto.
Because I do want to have time to go over some of your ideas as well.
I would say like and I'm not a big bell hooks person, to be clear, but I would say she's kind of operating in a similar tonality as like, I don't know, Naomi Klein or someone like that. To this guy, she might be pretty radical to this guy. Scum wasn't even radical; she was just LARPing. Yeah, but it depends on who you're talking. Different kinds of radical, right? Like radical means getting to the roots, like a radish, right? Radical means you're getting to the roots of things, which means whole frameworks, like massive shifts in how you're conceiving the world, perceiving the world, thinking things, thinking problems. That's what radical actually means. People tend to mean radical by like, oh my god, I can't believe he did that. Which is not. No, Shulamith Firestone, there you go.
But before we do, this is more of a general question. What advice would you give to an autistic person, diagnosed or otherwise, who might be watching this,
What advice would you give to Vosh Magpie? I do want to hear this.
who very much struggles with the idea that logical
Best feminist? Not the best feminist, surely, really?
consistency doesn't mean true necessarily.
I would say
Go ahead.
I would say you can only get logical consistency in very trivial circumstances. And in fact, my latest video was basically criticizing like physics envy, like quantification fetishism in the social sciences, because there are cases where quantification is useful, but we've really
He's lifting directly from Angela Collier here. That's honestly my read on this. I think he's going through his analytics, and literally, if somebody mentions, if there is any overlap at all, he's like, oh, that's what I'm doing now.
started using bad quantification where it's inappropriate, as well as like greedy reductionism, to sort of like.
I think of radical as totally tubular. I hate that, but I will assimilate it. When I say radical from now on, I'm actually going to, I'm not going to say radical anymore. I'm going to say totally tubular. Okay. Tubulescent, if you will.
Like, it's kind of cargo cult science. And so one of the things I was talking about is like math is a language. And people don't realize this, but math, we have innate number sense, but it's very limited. But math is actually a language. And the reason that like in physics or in mathematics or in chemistry, like everyone agrees on the quantification is because math is a relatively simple language. Everyone agrees on what it is. And in the semantics and linguistics, we use what's called propositional logic, which again, it's a language and it's a very simple one, so everyone can agree on it. But it's because it's like super trivial. And so once you like language exists to like serve our ends, we don't exist to like serve the ends of like language. And one of your videos, I made a note because you were talking about this. I sort of tried to hammer home to people is you were talking about like people being too pedantic about definitions. And I was like that when I was in high school, and it is against spiral dynamics. I think it's
Again, this is the only book he's read, because he imagines he's a yellow. Okay, he's enlightened. He's higher up. It says Myers-Briggs for I don't know what you'd put him at. Myers-Briggs for nerds.
I was doing it like when I was transitioning from blue and orange. Like I was arguing like, you know,
Oh man. You know the worst part about it? I know the comments. I see them all the time. Sounds like someone's jealous. It's like you don't understand the hell that you are witnessing here. You do not understand the suffering on display. This person is not happy. This person doesn't know what happiness is. This person is in hell, but he has like hell anosognosia. He can't tell. He can't tell that he's in pain. It's just, I also can't make sense of his face from this angle. That beard is like, look at this. What is happening here? Where is it? Where is the beard? What is the shape? Like, you just cover the eyes and you just look at this and it's like, I don't understand what I'm seeing. What is this beard, sir? Anyways.
the war on terror, and I'm like, okay, but we're supporting like these people. Like if you look at the definition of terrorism, it says the use of force and violence to intimidate and subjugate. And I'm like, well, like we're
Wait, what? What?
in orange. Like I was arguing like, the war on terror, and I'm like, okay, but we're supporting like these people. Like if you look at the definition of terrorism, it says the use of force and violence to intimidate and subjugate. And I'm like, well, like
No, it's not the use of force or violence to intimidate somebody. It's specifically targeting a civilian population. Because it's using social terror as the weapon. That's the point. It originates from the French, actually. He looks like a fish, yeah, but so do I from a certain angle, so I can't use that one.
we're doing that ourselves, and we're supporting all these regimes who are, but of course, implicit in that definition is
First time I went on camera, someone commented, President Senate looks like an anglerfish. And I had no disagreement. Do we still have that Anglerfish Sunday somewhere? I think it might be an emote on the channel, on the server.
but not when the state is doing it. It's only non-state actors who are terrorists, right?
Exactly.
And I wasn't
Yes.
acknowledging that that is how terrorism is used, whatever the dictionary says. And I, once I got past like early stage orange, I sort of got out of that, and then I realized, oh, and then I increasingly
He must be on that. He must be on that subreddit. It didn't even occur to me to think about that. He must be on that subreddit. That'd be a good bad theory topic, by the way. Reminder, by the way, there are two values at the bottom of the screen. Theory and drama. If you send a super chat, put the word theory or drama into your super chat. If we get to $100 in theory, we are at $62 currently, we will do a theory segment on a topic of your choosing, at minimum 1 hour, typically 1.5 to 3 hours. If, however, you would like the regular content to continue, put the word drama into your super chat. If we get to $100 in drama, the theory value goes down by 50%. If $100 super chats get to pick the next segment full cloth. Theory, drama, whatever. Only stipulation, I keep my clothes on. All right, here we go.
realized, we need to not try to define definitions and like stick to them. We need to figure out definitions exist to sort of describe how we're using words.
What?
Increasingly realized, we need to not try to define definitions and like stick to them. We need to
You need to not try to define definitions and stick to them.
figure out definitions exist to sort of describe
We need to figure out definitions exist to sort of describe
how we're using words.
how we're using words. Which mean what, why.
felt people understand. And like that was how Samuel Johnson, like when he wrote the original dictionary, he wasn't trying to like be prescriptive. He's saying this is how these words are used to help you understand them. And then we've sort of
that's how dictionaries work. Well done.
turned it on its end and done it backwards. And you can, for example, I've been meaning to make.
Oh my god, look at this. So I look up spiral dynamics on Reddit, and he's like the first thing here, right above me. Oh no. Oh god. What did I do to deserve this? This is like one of the one things this weirdo read. Although I guarantee he didn't read it. I'm pretty sure he also just used ChatGPT for it. Because reading is not a skill. Reading is a discipline. Reading is an ascetic activity for the sticklers, that requires you to focus on arguments made by people for a long time, often in silence. And a lot of people find that very hard. That's not a skill. The skill is learning how to read. As in, like how to look at those symbols on a page and hear or see ideas.
Video about this for a while, but I'm going to give you two sets of like perfectly logically.
That's the worst part about book talkers and like reading enthusiast channels on YouTube. Is they're all bullshitters, because reading isn't a skill. I mean, it is a skill in a limited sense, in like a basic sense. Reading is time consuming. It's an investment. Reading is an investment. It takes time. It costs you.
Consistent propositions that end up logically inconsistent. So one of them is Quakers are Protestant. Protestants are Christian.
Where are you on the spiral? Well, according to these people, I might be yellow. They're asking, is President Sunday at stage yellow? And I'm not even trying.
I am a Quaker. I am not a Christian.
He means he's a big oatmeal enthusiast.
Because we're talking about generalities.
Is stage yellow good? Well, let me put it this way. Okay, you know Malcolm X? Way above that.
Here, right? And so
I'm not a level 2.
Quakers are historically Protestant. Protestantism is a kind of, Christianity. And most Quakers, even in my branch of Quakerism, are Christian, but not all, right? And so you're sort of, the way I'm using these terms shifts subtly. That's what you always see in natural language.
Yeah, you're part of a Christian sect, but you're not a Christian. That's a little weird.
Mm-hmm. And similarly, so birds are dinosaurs. Dinosaurs are reptiles. Birds are not reptiles. And this is one that, a lot of people would disagree because they're trying to stick to a phylogenetic, term. But it's basically because we accept birds are dinosaurs because we're looking at the fossil record, and you can't really, early birds, they're just theropod dinosaurs. But and we accept dinosaurs are reptiles, similar reason. But in the modern era, there's a clear distinction. Reptiles as an evolutionary grade that we have used for most of our history are very different from birds. And it's not it is ridiculous to be trying to insist that birds are reptiles when that's just not. You're trying to change how the word has always been used to fit this sort of phylogenetic concept that
birds are reptiles. They're reptiles. Ugh. I know it's weird, okay? It's weird. Birds are dinosaurs. I know. It's weird. Yeah, exactly. You don't evolve out of a clade. Exactly. but birds are warm-blooded. Birds are warm-blooded reptiles. Birds are warm-blooded reptiles. Wake up, everybody.
I disagree with. I love the channel Clint's Reptiles, but he does a lot of videos like this, and it's good for educating people about phylogeny, so I'll excuse it. But then Hank Green also does this, like arguing humans are fish, and I'm like, no, we're not. We're used for these water animals, like, and I mean, if you're using it like sort of as a technically to educate people, great, but it's that's not how it's using to acknowledge how people use language, and that language is by its nature imperfect, and it's only by making very trivial systems like propositional logic or like math that you can actually get anything like logical consistency. And I do look at, like, with people's systems, like...
He does not understand how any of these classifications work. And to be fair, it would be very easy to get me confused about them because I am not a biologist, and I do find this stuff interesting, but I have not spent a lot of time studying it. But this is like one of those things that you learn through osmosis, just by sort of paying attention. Ugh. Oh my god. Like, fish is not a clade. Okay, moving on.
Are their systems like reasonably logically consistent? But even then, it's not going to be perfectly logically consistent because people are complicated. So I will like look at like with like ideologies, like I will ask, does this make sense like on its own terms? So like
I mean, a lot of it makes sense on its own terms. Bats are birds in the Bible. That makes sense on its own terms. You can run with that.
Big critic of judicial originalism, because judicial originalism is incoherent on its own terms, because the original like founders, like they didn't support originalism, and they didn't support like the Warren Court like judicial activism either, but it was like they were not the originalist to the extent that originalist wants to be, and so it's incoherent on the face of it. But
and like, real quick on that example, when you talk about judicial originalism, meaning the law should be understood as like original intent, like founders' intent.
Yeah. And so
the reason that you have a problem with that is because, I mean, I have a problem with that because it assumes that original intent therefore equals good, which is not the case. That's just self-evidently not true because people are imperfect. But what is your specific?
My specific complaint is the original intent, like the way that the drafters of the Constitution understood it, is that there would be evolution of like understanding of terms because that was how the common law had worked. So judicial originalism of we need to define these laws as they were written at the time they were written with no evolution at all as a response to like the Warren Court judicial activism is just, it's incoherent. It's one of several issues I have with it, but it's one that I'm bringing up as this is an example of a system that is incoherent on the face of it.
Yes.
And so there are it's the fundamental premises are incoherent.
Yeah, well, and your whole point about math is a language, but it's one that everyone agrees on. When I say the word two, we all know what the word two
Fish is like, what's the term? They're paraphyletic?
means. We know what the word three means. We know what the word four means.
Although there are some fields of math where it's a little bit fuzzy, but
that's fair. Yeah, well, I'm sure when we get into like crazy, negative numbers and zero, like zero is a crazy number.
So like, when you're dealing with a clade, you're dealing with basically the descendants of a common ancestor. When you're dealing with fish, some are left out because they're a paraphyletic group.
According to mathematicians, seems pretty straightforward to me. But like with regular language, it's like if I say Trump, the word Trump literally
See, that's a fish.
invokes a million different images. It's literally just saying a sound, your brain registers it, and then whoever I'm talking
Bruh, words are just like sounds, man.
to, that word is pulling from their set of memories and the things that they've seen on their Twitter feed and the first clips that come to mind and the first feelings they have in their family, who they might have feelings towards and all that. So as soon as I say the word Trump, we are not in any way talking about the same thing. I mean, unless you are literally talking about like Chicago, Illinois, where it's literally like a one-to-one referent to like a physical location or some, you know, very narrow thing. Like,
I mean, when I say Trump, I'm speaking German for pedophile.
a triangle is referring to something with whatever. But like anytime it's like ideological or politically charged, yeah, as soon as you the word itself carries so many different meanings that you can't have a language that is propositionally consistent if people disagree on what the semantic content is. That's
and also all words are polysemous to at least a little degree, but also like one thing I don't know the actual term. I use the term semantic freight, which I'm pretty sure is the wrong one. I've never actually looked it up. I just keep calling it semantic freight for like years. But like there is, as you said, like the emotional baggage, but we also don't use words like necessarily. Like I'm from Massachusetts, and I can use like Massachusetts in two different ways, depending on more of two different ways. But I can, like, if I'm like
the fact that this person is not suffering working at a Walmart job right now tells you that this person has money and has basically been allowed to vegetate for his entire life. Oh, we got Nozick coming up. Oh boy.
Like looking at like, oh yeah, they passed, Massachusetts loves passing dumb laws, and I'm like, that's London. I was like, oh yeah, that's
Gum laws.
Massachusetts. But also like Massachusetts is a high trust society with a lot of civic engagement, and I like hear about a good story about, oh, like this town of Massachusetts did this wonderful thing. Oh yeah, that's Massachusetts.
That's
right?
Massachusetts. Yeah, and I, you know, my whole, this is part, I mean, part of the reason that I have my
Because of money.
crusade against the over indexing on logical consistency, you know, was January 6th an insurrection? It's like you're so, that debate is so centered around the semantic, like what is the definition? And then we're just fitting things in. It's not what the reason we're having that debate is it moral to support Donald Trump? What do we,
like Massachusetts is a quote unquote high trust state because the people there are more wealthy than other states. I think, isn't Massachusetts like the highest earning state in the states? Where does it actually stand? Don't they have like a crazy high median income? Like Massachusetts is like the it's the bougie state. Yeah. So like the picture that's being painted is this is a guy who once again has been allowed to just not work. Just not do anything. And so he finds himself in adulthood in his 30s with nothing. No identity, no skills, no purpose, but a bunch of artifacts, and all of a sudden, lo and behold, a consumer accessible system that will allow you to pretend knowing everything at the click of a button for free.
What are our opinions about immigration? So you have all of these surface level debates, in my opinion, that are very propositional. Was this treason? Was this bad? Is it illegal? Blah, 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 all these different things. Not that that's not relevant. Whether or not something's legal or illegal is important. But when it comes to like hashing out disagreements between ideologies, you have to get to the all of the context beneath those words. And often that's emotional and all that.
Yeah. And what was I was going to say something else, but now I'm lost track of where I was.
He's got too much information going through his head. He keeps losing track because he's gifted, you see.
Okay, well, I was going to maybe draw a bridge.
By the way, nothing is more cringe, especially when you have no accomplishments to your name whatsoever to say that you're gifted or you're in Mensa or that you're smart or that your IQ is high. How about you show us you accomplishing something? And take pride in that. Like, oh, you better be careful. I rolled high in intelligence points. Like, show us.
If you don't remember.
By the way, low key, the smartest people will tell you they're stupid. The smartest people will act like they're normies. The smartest people will not let you know that they're smarter than you because they want you to think they're cool. Just FYI. This is why when you go to university and you talk to professors, they're going to be really, a lot of them are going to be really gentle and personable and not pretentious. But your fellow students will be, because they don't know anything. Sent a clip. Oh, what is it now?
Do you think I would get into Mensa? I have
This
no
guy.
idea whether or not I would.
I love
but I
this.
do have a perhaps arrogant, no wait, definitely arrogant, but perhaps justifiably arrogant, idea that a fair number of you think I would. Something about the public persona I have constructed, or has been constructed around me, is a good fit for Mensa. I might be wrong, but I reckon most people...
My favorite, by the way, is Mensa Select board games. Guys, these are board games for smart people. The Forbidden Island. The dumbed down version of Pandemic. Mensa Select. Love it.
who vaguely heard of me, if asked, would David Mitchell get into Mensa, would vaguely say, yeah, he seems the sort, before asking what the hell kind of question that was to ask suddenly in the supermarket or during sex. Now, if I'm right about that perception of me, why on earth would I ever actually apply? I'd have nothing to gain, and everything, in the perfectly likely event that I failed the entrance exam, to lose. So the people who do join Mensa are, it seems to me, those who expect that the answer to that question in their case would be, oh God, no. People, in other words, with something to prove. You can't really imagine a Prime Minister or President joining up. You needn't think I'm just the leader of the free world, I'm also good at word games. And sure enough, when you look through the list of famous members and former members, it's short on professors and Nobel laureates, and long on professional sports people, actors and glamour models. Not that there's anything wrong with being any of those things, I'm at least one of them myself. But they're all areas in which the response, oh, and they're clever as well, is more likely than, oh, and they're clever, of course. Jimmy Savile was a member. Carol Vorderman is a member. Jamie Thixton is a member. Stephen Hawking is not. Maybe he applied and failed. Maybe. Perhaps the most eloquent way of illustrating what I'm trying to say is that CJ from Eggheads is a member of Mensa. Kevin from Eggheads is not. I can't help feeling that the governing characteristic of Mensa members is not, or at least not only, high intelligence, but a feeling that they are not given sufficient credit for that intelligence. But intelligence in the abstract has no value. If your intelligence hasn't been noted by your fellow man, perhaps the question to ask yourself is why you failed to deploy it in a more striking way, rather than asserting your intelligence by joining a club, the only criterion for membership of which is that you can pass the test that allows you to join, like a sort of reverse Groucho Marx.
That was so fucking good. Oh my god.
Fundamentally, being
This is old? Yeah, but it's timeless.
underrated is a failure in presentation.
This person is a gift and he must be protected.
I have always flattered myself that I am overrated. Perhaps you agree. If so, please don't feel obliged to leave a comment saying so.
Oh, I love I love those guys.
You said you had opinions on what people misunderstand about right-wing ideology broadly. So I guess my question would be, to someone who doesn't seem to understand right-wing ideology, what advice would you give them for trying to break it down?
Oh boy.
So there's a few things. So I'm sure you've heard of Jonathan Haidt's Righteous Mind, right? And the
Totally.
Foundation theory.
Essential dark centrist reading, in my opinion.
Jonathan Haidt is one of the most worthless humans, by the way, who has written and published a book.
But I feel like he's wrong about a number of things, including I think people on the left generally have those foundations too. They just apply them differently. But one thing I found really actually helpful is Arnold Kling's Three Language of Politics.
Oh, it's not Nozick. See, this is what I thought he was. This is what I thought he was holding up when I was looking at the preview. You can understand why I was confused. I thought he was holding up this, but apparently not. Never mind.
And I found it actually, I didn't believe him about the left because I was sort of having like a separate conversation where I was like talking different meanings. I was saying things and they were agreeing with me, but meaning very different things. And it wasn't until I read Thomas Sowell, Conflict of Visions, Constrained or Tragic versus the Unconstrained Vision, that I realized
He's a right-winger. I said this already. This is your average Sargon viewer. That's who this guy is.
I adhere to the Constrained Vision, have for at least all my adult life. But
it's see, the thing of it is even if, by the way, you're a consumer of right-wing books, if you're actually reading them, you will eventually have a nuanced, distinct position within them because they will disagree with each other ever so slightly. But he just agrees with everything that he owns. He just agrees with it. And the reason why is because he's not reading anything. He's getting a summary from ChatGPT. And that's it. Hey, Sunday, you know our old channel together? Yeah, but we closed that X Videos account, Brooks, remember?
I had sort of like left-leaning sentiments that had me like, so I would describe things in the terms of the constrained vision and then talk to people on the left and they would be agreeing with me, but they would mean them A, in the unconstrained version, and B, also, as with Arnold Kling, like they would mean like sort of a lot of people on the left, most people on the left, and then a lot of people like sort of more centrist liberals understand people as you belong to oppressor or oppressed categories, and that sort of defines you, which I never did. And so it actually took me longer.
Yeah, I kind of figured that.
Understand that. But basically, he says that the thing that sort of the language that defines the right is talking about things in terms of civilization versus barbarism. And so, and I realized that actually does sort of explain a lot of right-wing thought, including stuff that sort of struck me as incoherent. So, for example, I have an interest that I developed in Southern Africa, like
there are left-wingers who use civilization versus barbarism. What do you want about
supremacist colonial regimes in Southern Africa? And it's fascinating because the Rhodesian government portrayed themselves as we're, fighting against barbarism, and the communist guerrillas did do some horrific things, but the Rhodesians themselves were horrifically barbaric in their counterinsurgency. But it's barbarism, we're defending. It's basically, it sometimes takes barbarism to defend civilization. And one thing, actually two things. So one thing I've realized, and I didn't.
Sometimes it takes barbarism to defend civilization, guys.
Pull Samuel Francis Leviathan and His Enemies, but reading it sort of crystallized for me.
Every single thing that he has even a passing actual investment in is some right-wing grifting screed. It's like without fail. It's so funny. Because, like, obviously what this guy actually does is he just watches Jonathan Haidt and Jordan Peterson. He pretends when they're talking really hard, they're talking to him. Okay? This is it is bleak. This is bleak. This is not only not where you want to end up, this is not a place you ever want to be, even for a little while. This is a bad place. This is a bad ending for a human being. This is a bad ending by default for a human being, even if it's not the ending. Bad. It's a bad place to be.
He basically, and have you seen the channel Analyzing Finance with Nick Pardini at all?
That sounds vaguely familiar. I'll look it up, but go ahead.
He does old money versus new money and like how that defines U.S. politics. Basically, you have the
we're going to learn his old money.
Establishment, you have the counter-establishment. And so the establishment is the managerial elites. The counter-establishment is the business elites, basically. And so basically what Francis says is, so the right in the United States is a coalition between the counter-establishment, which is itself a coalition of the old bourgeois, like the old capitalist managerial elites.
So real question, where is the line between this and Professor Dave's video? This person is in full control of his faculties, and he is simply pathetic. This is not someone who is in imminent danger of self-harm. This is a grifter who happens to be talentless and uncharming. These are different. the person Professor Dave was going after wears the history of his self-harm on his face. He is actively disorganized in his thinking. He is obviously delusional. And his parents are worried for him, and Professor Dave is endangering him. We have people like this in the comments all the time. Okay? This is what Origin of Language would be if he had money.
He calls the prescriptivist order, which seems to be both basically dead but there are and obviously someone who's interested in fringe ideas, how they can trickle down. A lot of neo-reactionary types, they're not numerous, but they are coming with a lot of ideas. And then you have the post-bourgeois, which is best I can tell. I feel like from how he describes it, the best example, they're not writing books, and the best example of someone articulating the post-bourgeois worldview would be Asmongold. But
What?
He's not writing books, that's for sure.
Yeah, where it's this blue
Asmongold is post-bourgeois. What?
collar, and there are sort of these assumptions there, but they're all sort of permeated by philosophical liberalism to some degree, but to different degrees. And so the counter establishment is made up of different groups, which then are aligned with the right wing of the establishment. And so the right wing of the establishment is basically neoliberal. The bourgeois would be what you'd call classically liberal or libertarian. And then you have these other groups that generally don't have. So you have, on one hand, you have the people who they're all sort of ideas, but they don't really have a following, right? So the neo-reactionaries. And then on the other hand, you have the people who have a following, but they don't really articulate their ideas. And so the right is represented basically primarily by the right wing of the establishment and the bourgeois sort of elements of the counter-establishment, who both are...
Asmongold is an employer. He's bourgeois. What do you want about?
Strong adherents to the liberal tradition, who are also... So, have you heard of James Burnham's The Machiavellians?
See, I freaking told you. The only things he has any acquaintance with are right-wing things, and then he combines that with Jordan Peterson-esque personality test bullshit. It's like... It's like clockwork.
No, but is James Burnham the one who came up with the professional managerial class?
Managerial Revolution, yes, he is.
Yeah, okay.
He also wrote this book, The Machiavellians, Defenders of Freedom. And so one of the things he talks about is Vilfredo Pareto, best known for the Pareto principle, 80-20 rule. He has this idea of the circulation of the elites based on people who have what he calls class 1 or class 2 residues. So class 1 residues are basically what he calls residue for combinations. So instinct for clever solutions, tending to not like brute force. And then you have instinct for preservation, which tends to prefer more direct brute force. And so Burnham was okay, for convenience, I'm going to base this on Machiavelli. I'm going to call the first group foxes and the second group lions. And basically, when you have the circulation of the elites, you need foxes to lead that, the lions. And then typically what would happen is the lions would overthrow the old regime. And then gradually the foxes would come to predominate, and you would have sort of a new change.
This is stupid, because the entire point of Machiavelli is that you don the aspect of the fox or the lion as the situation demands.
And so it's a case where the right is... So it's a few things. So one is, I have a lot of ideas on this, as you can see. Basically, as I've been reading a lot of right-wing thought, trying to sort of...
Claude AI has generated a lot of ideas for you on this.
Make sense of it. And so one thing is, the two big representatives you see of right-wing thought, they're either the neoliberal, right-wing of the managerial establishment.
This is the most stupid form of self-brainwashing I've seen in some time. Well, he's gifted, you see.
Or the classically liberal bourgeoisie. And so they're making arguments for conservatism based on sort of a foxy approach that doesn't really fit with sort of the lion-y attitude that you see in the main body of the right. And it's also kind of almost inconsistent. And I would say even a little bit, I think conservatism, sort of is kind of the neoliberal, classical liberal conservative is sort of straight up incoherent, because it's basically, okay, we're just going to try to, it's sort of a rolling window of we're going to try to stop the clock here that doesn't really seem to be thinking about anything.
Yeah.
This is where I have the nostalgia, so let's stop the clock here, basically.
Yeah, right. And real quick, where does a Nick Fuentes, the reactionary right, where do they fit in that paradigm? Because that growing faction, the Tucker Carlson's, Marjorie Taylor Greenes, they wouldn't fit into that neoliberal versus classical liberal paradigm.
Yeah, so they're neither. Nick, I don't know what to make of. I mean, I honestly think Nick Fuentes is like a plant designed to make like anti-immigration, because I'm someone who is pro-immigration, but I see like the problems with the way, and like if you let me design the immigration system, I would be basically prioritizing. So I mentioned like Seneca's barbell to you like in email to see Nicholas Taleb, and he's like, generally instead of trying to find a compromise, like combine extremes. And so I would be basically, put it to me, I would basically have a free movement of labor with sort of all the developed European, East Asian, and like a handful of like developed Latin Americans like Costa Rica, Panama, Chile countries, just complete free movement of labor, because these countries, people assimilate well. And then I would have basically, you know about what the O visa is?
The O visa?
Yeah. So it's for people of exceptional talent.
Yes.
So I would have basically unlimited O visas and a new class of entrepreneur visa for people who are going to like create businesses. I would probably do away with the H-1Bs and be like, if they're truly exceptional, you should be able to get them an O visa. Although I recognize that the incentive structure would then be to then make the O visa work like the H-1B visa. So I don't know how you work.
Yeah, well, we know you're not competing with the fruit pickers. That's for goddamn sure.
Against that. And then I would be
What is this? This is what happens when you have someone who can't physically remove themselves from their house trying to act like a kingmaker because his only skill is pretending to think. Jesus Christ.
To the extent that we can handle, like, and the communities can handle, like, the most desperate refugees. So I would be prioritizing it. And so I would be obviously letting in more people overall, right? Because I'd be letting in probably more refugees.
Letting in more gifted people like yourself. Got it.
But certainly more immigrants in terms of like the first two categories. But that's not happening. And instead, we're almost surgically letting in groups that seem like designed to stoke resentment against having immigrants in.
If that's your concern, sir, I would recommend the swiftest boat to Panama.
And it's like, why are we doing it this way? And I have like hypotheses I don't really know the answer, but I am getting to the point where I'm like, we've sort of seen like opposition to immigration.
This person, by the way, would be bullied to hell working in the most menial entry-level office job. Anything. This is the person who breaks down at a retail job and then storms out they don't cry. They don't go home having persevered and then cry. They don't break down from the stress. They get resentful and angry because they've been hard done by. Because they're obviously better than everybody else there. But they hate them for it. They hate them because they're better. That's that person. We've all worked with that person.
Immigration being like marginalized as, oh, this is totally beyond the pale when it's a completely legitimate political position. And I'm also, even as someone who in an ideal world would have more immigration, but like in a different way that we are, I'm like, if I had to choose between like a complete ban on immigration and keeping the system working the way it is, I don't want to get there, but I'm increasingly sort of getting there. And so when I look at someone like Nick Fuentes, I'm like, in like, especially like people like that who are calling for like, repatriation, remigration, right? It's like, are they trying to, and again, I've seen conspiracy theories about like,
I am really glad that we have these ultra competent, super fit Ubermensch to, inform our country's immigration policies.
To have come out of nowhere. So I don't, at the very least, like he's not someone, even though he has followers, I don't really take him that seriously, but you almost wonder, he seems surgically targeted to push people like me back to being like, okay, yeah, if I had to pick between complete cessation of immigration and the current system, I'm picking the current system, right? Towards, I'm still there, right? Where I am now, I would pick the current system, but as things go on, I'm sort of getting closer to, if I had to pick that again. But anyway, sorry.
Had to pick? I want to see you try to pick a fruit. I want to see you walk to the middle of a field, and then after you finish throwing up, sweating, try to reach up to pull a peach off a tree. I want to see you try.
This is way getting off topic of the main question of, so Nick Fuentes, he's populist, right? So he doesn't really, in Francis's framework, I think he would be post-bourgeoisie, although he's obviously articulate, and he's an example of like a fox leading the post-bourgeoisie. And so that's the thing, is I think a lot of people who are associated with the sort of the right-wing populism, they are foxes in a movement that's mainly lions. And that's why I find Asmongold interesting, because I think he is actually a lion, but he is
Asmongold the lion.
is sufficiently like good at expressing his views clearly that I can sort of understand what like the mass of that movement thinks. And so yeah, I guess that's I don't really pay a lot of attention to Fuentes, even though I have a lot of opinions on him. So
Sure. That's fair. We are
These are the humans who pretend to be you, chat. Their life's ambition is for really dumb people. I mean, really dumb. Like, it is very hard as someone with values and standards to express how dumb the audience for these people are, without violating ethical norms that I hold for myself. But suffice it to say, let's just put it this way. You would not ask them to stock a shelf without supervision. It's He yapped for like 4 minutes just to end that with, I don't really pay attention to Fuentes. Well, he's gifted, you see. He's gifted. It's uncouth to say, you know. But he's gifted. His thoughts grow like a tropical forest. Sometimes even he can't follow them.
coming up on an hour. I know we said beforehand there'd be no shortage of topics. It'd only be time that we're shortage of. I'd be happy to speak again at some point, maybe cover it more in detail on certain things. I know you had several books on the stack. Is there anything in these last like 5 minutes that you for sure want to cover now, or just
Sir, for the love of God, get a haircut. This is not happening. This is not happening. This isn't it. This isn't combing it. It's not going to help you. Just you take this off. You just got the round part on top. You're fine. Or at least like make a man bun. Do the Vosh thing. I don't know what this is. Don't do that.
Whatever you are most itching to talk about.
I did maybe want to tease this, and we can talk about it next if we do talk about it next time.
That's right. Yes,
the adoption curve. This is something that I have you're talking about a process, so that like a flow of these ideas, and I've been thinking about for a while because my ideas are inaccessible, like to people to a good degree, and like a lot of the people I like are as well. And so I ended up sort of dividing, and
Sir, most of the people you like wrote popular level political pamphlets.
4 or 5 levels, because this one is this would be like, I don't know if you heard about Frank Zappa talking about the Scrags, right? Like these very just completely sort of outsider, like no knowledge, but then you at least have these 4 of you have sort of the mainstream, like sort of be Stephen King, J.K. Rowling, Shakespeare, and like obviously like Shakespeare and Agatha Christie last. I don't know if King or Rowling will, but they're the ones popular, everyone sort of knows. Then
everyone knows Shakespeare.
You have what I call the near highbrow of they're considered.
Is he saying Shakespeare is lowbrow? Shakespeare is phenomenally depthful. What the fuck?
Highbrow, people actually read them. Then you have the far highbrow of people will reference them, but
oh my god, he's telling us how advanced and esoteric the literature he reads is. Show us Shakespeare up at the orange level. Shakespeare is blue, apparently.
Really read them. And then you have the people who generally, unless you're an actual, like one of these 2 categories of creator, you don't even know who they are. So I put the strictly X's X, like writer's writer, musician, right?
Yeah, and then name him. Who are you talking about?
All 3 of these are X's X, like writer's writer, musician, but this one is strictly X's X because it's generally only people who would be in these categories will have heard of them. And so this is me like in a static position trying to figure out, I kind of tend to be like around.
I think I just burped into the mic. I apologize.
Here, right? And I'm like, can I write things that would get me into at least here where people would actually read what I wrote?
Yeah.
Can he dumb himself down enough for you, chat?
Influence the influencer.
Yeah. Yeah. So instead of influence the influencer, can I actually get to places where at least some of like the popular audience would like read what I'm saying? And that's been a question for me. But I realized this sort of dynamic also seems sort of similar to your meme adoption curve, where I'm thinking of outsiders in terms of like outsider art, but it's still like 4chan is very much like an outsider community.
Yeah, right.
You has that sort of same trickle down. So
Yeah. Well, and even just kind of like from an archetypal perspective, the prophet is someone who lives on the edge of society out in the desert and eats honey and like has no interaction with civilization, but is just right on the proximity enough where
Well, I guess we know what's happening to the bees then.
they're still able to be in contact with it. And the new knowledge always comes from the prophet. The prophet influences people, and so there's like that's an old certainly a real dynamic. It's been captured in different ways. But yeah, maybe we can go in on that and any other thing in the future. I appreciate it, Magpie.
Nice talking to you.
This is my life now. I watch these weirdos and I laugh at them. He's talking about archetypes. He's like mixing them. So he's shifting from advancedness to political outsiders. Center this channel is a wild ride. Listen, okay, my problem is I love too much, okay? Magpie versus Jang debate, please. Oh, that would be phenomenal. That would be, it'd be wonderful. I hope that happens. But you know what we actually need to do? We need to get a Magpie Brooks conversation. Because I've made content about Magpie, but Brooks has not, which means Brooks is unknown. So Brooks, we need to get you in the same screen. It will be fun. We need to get Brooks and Magpie talking. It's going to be wonderful. We need to do it. It needs to happen. Okay. We need to get them into a room. Brooks, I'm not taking no for an answer. You need to do it. All right. I'm going to go to bed. Have a good night, everyone. Take it easy. Thank you for joining me. If you appreciate my content, we are going live on Patreon tomorrow at around 2:30 p.m. PDT. We're going to be going into Donna Haraway's Simians, Cyborgs, and Women, the Reinvention of Nature. And possibly playing some routine. We'll see. And have call-ons, etc., etc. But I digress. Have a good night. We're going to raid into Geordie. I said good night already. Bye-bye. Go away.